What is up, everyone? Nintern here. We are back with another season of World of Warcraft Midnight, Season 2. This is going to be my Devourer guide for the season for Raid and Mythic Plus. We're going to go over talents, stats, tier set, crafting, trinkets. Everything you're going to want to know is going to be in this guide for Season 2. If you don't know who I am currently the FAQ/guide writer for the Fellhammer Discord for both Devourer and Havoc. I also am a Devourer theory crafter. But before we get into it, make sure to join my Discord, my community Discord, which is in the link below. Also be sure to like and subscribe, and let's just get into the guide. Okay, let's talk talents. First, just gonna flat out say Devourer is really strong on PTR right now. There is a chance we just get flat aura nerfed. There is currently a bug for Devourer that some of our spells like consume or like more Devour, but like Cull are benefiting twice from haste in meta. So it does spike us up quite a bit in sims and just in real gameplay as well. But just keep that in mind. The recommendations aren't likely to change at this point, but for all content, we are currently recommending Void Scarred melee, and Annihilator is fine in Mythic Plus. Granted, like, Annihilator is strong also, but more so because Devourer is strong, not necessarily that Annihilator itself is strong. Void Scarred has really strong cleave and priority damage, and that Annihilator just doesn't have. Annihilator is just kind of a pad spec a little bit. But just to get that out of the way, but for our pure single target raid build, all of our Void Scar melee builds don't take Apex. This is very familiar if you saw last season the melee builds that we were running. Basically just the idea here is like we have Flamebound now, so like Hungering Slash is pressed, more so it's smuggled, which again I'll get into later, but just for build itself, this is pure single target. We don't take Eradicate for that reason. If there's Cleave of literally any kind, that is, like, the thing is with this build, like, Void Surges and, like, Hungering Slash are good enough cleave for really short-lived cleave scenarios. Think, like, Lura Crystals near the end of the season, that, like, Eradicate wouldn't entirely be necessary as long as the target count is low. But when you're in Cleave, you'll swap over to Void Scarred Raid Cleave, which in Cleave scenarios, including Mythic Plus, we do drop Unrestrained Fury just to drop 20 max Fury, because in pure single target, we are extending meta. In AoE, we are not. Again, get into that later. But all this is really doing is just picking up Eradicate. Like, that's really the only thing that changes for Cleave. And then for Mythic Plus, for Void Scarred, the main changes we are making is we pick up 2 points in Void Rage, because Mastery is pretty good for us in AoE, and we drop like the 2% crit and like Duty Eternal, because Duty Eternal is just kind of like a small single target buff. And then we pick up Soul Forged Blades over Singular Strikes for the same reason. We're kind of AoE maxing here because our single target is just so good that why not just grab some of the AoE. And then swapping over to Annihilator single target, this is a little bit different from the Annihilator build of this season 1. Obviously pure single target, no Eradicate, but with the tier set and the GCD bug, or the haste bug rather, you're always going to take second helping, and just in pure single target, Annihilator just kind of wants to maximize reap casts. So it's also taking Umbral Blade here as well, because it is partly too because it is just such a haste. It's heavier in haste than Void Scarred is. And then for Annihilator AoE, the only real changes is that we're picking up Eradicate, and we drop Umbral Blade for Void Purge to get more Void Rays in meta, but that's really the only change there. Void Scarred is very picky, a little picky, but you basically want to be between 18 to 20% haste rating on your gear itself. And as always, sim for best results. I'm always going to say that. I'm not going to repeat it a whole ton in this video just because I've stressed that a lot in my other videos. But 18 to 20% haste is your top priority. And that's about, as you can see on my character, it's like 800 to like a little like 900, 8 to 900. And then after that, you're basically just dumping the rest into crit and mastery as your sim kind of dictates. Because we run Freight Runner's Flask, that's going to weigh mastery a little bit harder. But we're still using Wreckpot, things like that. And you'll have haste procs from things like the Helm from the new raid, you know, from Gebos or from Soulfang, which, again, I'll talk about sort of cantrips and trinket gear later. But stats, pretty simple. Haste 18 to 20%, greater than crit equal to mastery, greater than verse, greater than haste. After you get that haste breakpoint at that 18 to 20%, you don't want any more haste after that because it's just a dead stat, basically, for reasons that are kind of rotational and dependent, because in AoE, you want to, after your second Void Ray in meta in AoE, you basically don't want to be in meta anymore. And again, I'll go over that when we get to rotation and priority. But yeah, that is currently Void Scarred's stat priority. Annihilator stat priority is pretty much kind of the same, but the same as it was in Season 1, rather, where haste is greater than mastery, but in this season it's kind of haste is greater than mastery equal to crit, greater than verse. Again, sim for best results. Don't try to like min-max it that hard. Just trust your sim. It will guide you to where you need to go for stats. And then tier set. Our tier set does obviously the same thing for both, unless we have a Mana Forge situation next tier. But harvesting 4 or more soul fragments with Reap has a 20% chance to cause your consume to be instant cast and explode in a soul burst, dealing cosmic damage to nearby enemies. Soul burst generates 8 soul fragments and grants Moment of Craving. Reap deals 20% more damage. So, what this is doing is it's really spiking our soul generation in certain points, but it's also introducing more RNG to that as well, which, as far as gameplay goes, for the sake of keeping it simple right now before we go into rotation later in the guide, it's spending the soul bursts when they happen. They're very high prio, they're extremely high priority. And then reaping, pressing reap whenever you have 4 souls is very important as well. Just to try to trigger soul bursts. And the 20% reap damage is part of why Void Scarred is so good. But it also helps Annihilator as well. It just reinforces reap casts for Annihilator beyond just, you know, do it when you have Voidfall. So, but that is our stats and tier set for Season 2. So, I don't have anything up in Gabe right now, but let's talk about crafting for Season 2 for Devourer. I'm going to put some stuff up on the screen over in this world. Crafting for Devourer, you're going to craft a weapon start of the season. This is basically because crafting weapons at the start of any season is just really strong, because weapons are generally the biggest power gain you can get. Especially for us, because we are able to use, we're the only dual wielding caster, so we get full intellect from both of our weapons. But you'll craft that with the ritual hunt stone embellishment, which again will be on screen. And then your next craft is boots or wrists. If you're a mythic raider, probably boots first, because there are myth wrists from the first boss of the raid. With Arcana Weave lining, that is again sticking around for this tier. General recommendation is Arcana Weave lining. Now, part of this, and this is just going to be an in-game pull-up, I'm just going to pull it up here. In the raid, we have the Baleful Hexblade and Janthrezet the Soulfang. So we have 2 344 weapons from Mythic. So if you are never going to kill either of these bosses on Mythic, this is where your crafting ends. Like, just the weapon, you'll wear the weapon all season, and then you'll make the Arcana Weave off piece. But if you are a huge CE gamer, or Hall of Fame gamer, or Race the World First, you will craft, once you get access to one of the 344 weapons, you will then craft the other off piece. So if you crafted wrists first, you'll craft boosts first, and vice versa. You'll craft the other piece with also another Arcana Weave lining, and then you'll ditch the crafted weapon. We are just in a position that we're able to do that, where like Havoc, for example, they're gonna use a crafted off and all season. Now there's a chance, you know, we are gonna get the turbo boost system like we did in season 1, so like that'll change, but I'll make content for 12.15 when it gets here, and then we can adjust recommendations at then. But that is crafting for now in season 2. All right, let's talk trinkets and cantrips. We'll start just with our BIS stuff, and then kind of go from there. But first is Gebo's Bottomless Bag from the Lost Explorers in the raid. This is just, it has a bunch of different effects, like it can give you haste, crit, whatever. It also has, you know, a proc for giving you all stats or taking away all stats, which is pretty rare. But just in general, this is a really good trinket. You're going to want it all the time. And then after that, your other best in slot trinket is going to actually be a dungeon trinket. Whoa, dungeon trinket. Wow. It's going to be the Freight Runner's Flask from Murder Row. This will be very easy to get on here. Like, we're not bonus rolling this almost ever. If you, like, it's the very last thing you'll ever bonus roll, just because bonus rolling dungeons compared to raid, especially now that raid bonus rolls only cost 1 bonus roll and dungeons also only cost 1. Bonus rolling dungeons is kind of bad, air quotes, just because raid gear is so good. But Freight Runner's Flask is very similar to our Veilgore's Final Stare from Season 1. It's just a minute 30 stat stick. In this case, it's just giving you crit, which, considering our stat changes, this season works out pretty nice for us. But it's the same logic. You just use it right after you enter meta, and then you're golden. Other trinkets of note. One is the Ruby Whelp Shell from Ruby Life Pools. This one, you have to train it for 6 days. In my written guides, there is a, for Devourer specifically, there is a section on how to train the Ruby Whelp. But specifically, you just want 4 crit trainings and 2 haste trainings. And then in that guide, there are details on how to do that I won't go into fully in depth here. All right, then other trinkets. I'm not going to really mention any other ones from dungeons because there's already 2 that are pretty good from dungeons. So, I mean, like, Mind Piercer Sigil is like okay, but like not very good at all. But from not Venomous Abyss, from Tidebound Grotto, Wavecaller Seastone is pretty good. If for some reason you get it on Myth and you don't have Gebos or Tidecaller, or not Tidecallers, if you don't have Gebos or the Freight Runner's Flask, it's good. It's not bad. But you're very specifically targeting Gebos and the Freight Runner's Flask. And then talking about cantrip effects. Cantrip effects are kind of the name of the game this season. We will start with the one from dungeons that we can get, the Polished Lightwood Channeler. Our damaging spells have a chance to launch a mote of light towards your target, inflicting holy damage split among nearby enemies. Damage increased by 30% per additional enemy, up to 150%. This is fine. It's nothing crazy. It's not going to be our best for the season. But you can get it at 334, or, you know, you can get it as a hero dagger early on. That wouldn't be bad at all. When we get turbo boost later in the season, this would probably be higher in consideration, but for now, it's just a good, like, gearing up weapon until you can get access to those 344 weapons. But if we go to the raid, we go to Ula'tek, there is Janthrazet the Soul Fang. Your spells have a chance to drain a nearby enemy's will, reducing their cast speed by 10% and increasing your haste by 138 for 12 seconds. This is our BIS weapon. And if you're running, you know, one-hand dagger, even at the 6 out of 6 myth, which you can get by bonus rolling on heroic, this is still going to be better than, like, Lightwood Channeler with a crafted weapon. So, like, That's why the Lightwood Channeler is much more of like a I'm gearing up weapon rather than it's basically you use it until you get this. And then we have a Curebane Reliquary. Your spells and ability and all of the jewelry from the raid reduces your damage taken on the new zone and in the raid from specifically Deadly Venom by a percentage. But your spells and abilities have a chance to increase your critical strike by 550, but reduce your other secondary stats by 91 for 12 seconds. That's already a strong cantrip, and it has 2 sockets, and it only has crit on it. This thing, it's insane. It is an insane piece of jewelry for next season. Because the thing is with bonus rolls next season, if you bonus roll on Heroic, it is a 1 out of 6 myth piece. Same with if it's from your vault as well on Heroic. So, yes, the myth version of this is 344, but even at 334, it's absolutely ridiculous. So, get it. Gaze of the Coiled Watcher. Your spells and abilities have a chance to increase your haste by 377, but reduce your other secondary stats by 62 for 12 seconds. Same thing as the Reliquary. This just has haste on it. This is our Abyss Helm as well, even at 334. Cantrips are good. Cantrips are especially good when other things don't have cantrips, but you can get them at the same eye level relatively easily. So just something to keep in mind there. We don't actually have any cantrips from Coiled Altar, but that is kind of where we're at with cantrip items and trinkets for Season 2 of Midnight on Devourer. All right, let's talk gems, enchants, consumables for Devour for Season 2. Nothing really different from Season 1. You're still going to run Eye of the Eagle on rings. You're still going to run like Flask of the Magister for mastery. Personal food, you'll run secondary stat personal food. Feast, there's actually a new feast for a secondary stat called Feast of Knowledge. It's really good if your raid uses that. Pot, Potion of Recklessness, Weapon Buff, Thrust, Thalassian Phoenix Oil. Gems, you're generally just going to run Mastery Crit Gems. It depends on how much haste you need to hit our breakpoints. It's really variable. Weapons is generally going to be double Arcane Mastery. Again, Sim for best results. And then obviously you'll run a Spell Thread, which I think it's Sunfire Spell Thread, for Intellect and Stamina. But nothing too crazy on the gems, enchants, and consumables front. But yeah. All right. I'm going to do this a little differently than I normally do. Part of the reason for that is because I think it'll be easier for people to keep track of this if I'm in a video explaining it in the guide form. So right now I am looking at my Devourer guide in the Fellhammer Discord, and what we're gonna do is we're just gonna walk through it and I'll explain the reasoning behind certain things, and then at the end of this video I am going to include a clip of each of the opener sequences that Devourer has. And just Devourer is so variable in how things work that I think it's better to provide the priority in this form and then afterward sort of provide that opener, because openers are pretty static as far as things go. And Voidscarred, we have a lot to talk about that I think is best represented with me talking about the written form of that, if that makes sense. If it doesn't work for people, then we can iterate it on it in the next season when the next season's guides come out. But so we've already gone over talents, so I'm not going to go over those again. But our single target opener, and we're going to go over Annihilator first, just because Voidscarred's really going to get into the weeds. So Annihilator first because it's familiar for people and nothing much has really changed. Keep in mind, this opener can change wildly due to unexpected procs. So this assumes a certain scenario, but we'll talk about priority right after. But you're always going to precast Soul Immo and a Consume. That'll get you to 4 souls and you'll reap. And then this sequence right here, Consume, Soul Immo, Consume, Reap, Void Ray, Consume, Erad, Void Ray, Consume, meta, use Trinkets and Potions, Void Ray, C-Star, Erad. This is just a sequence. This isn't going to be every single time you do this, because you're going for goals especially outside of meta as Annihilator, I mean, as both specs, you want to get to meta, back into meta as quickly as you can. So this, especially in the opener, this is our best way to do that. And it's more about the spell priority, especially outside of meta, which, you know, Soul Burst procs, spending those are always going to be your top priority outside of meta. I mean, even in meta as well, so long as you're not, you know, munching and getting rid of your already existing Moment of Craving proc after a Void Ray. But triggering Soul Burst, always pressing call it 4+ souls, meta, Void Ray, Soul Immo, Consume. Pretty basic outside of meta spell priority because we want to get into meta as fast as possible. And while still doing, I mean, you still want to do some damage outside of meta as well as Annihilator, but reaping at 4 souls triggers Soul Bursts, which Soul Bursts are an instant 8 souls. That's going to get you into meta really fast if you can proc those. During meta, kind of the same thing. Soul Bursts, Void Ray shoots up because it does have a cooldown, and you want to get it on cooldown because it can generate a good amount of souls as well. And it triggers Moment of Craving. Unless you're going to overcap yourself, call it 4+ souls, C-Star, Devourer. Pretty simple stuff. The opener for this is pretty similar. It just has Eradicate in it instead because the single target one, I mean, the single target one does, but it just, there's more of an emphasis because you're an AoE. Outside of meta, we're basically the same thing. Erad at 10 souls is included, or 4+ if it'll trigger Voidfall, just because 10 soul eradicates are so important in AoE. Spell priority during meta, Collapsing Star if you would go above 40 souls, Devour if it'll trigger Soul Burst, Erad at 10 souls or 4+ if it'll trigger Voidfall, just like above, Void Ray, C-Star, call it 4+ souls, Devour. Just some general tips. Smuggling just means you're carrying something into meta from out of meta, which for Annihilator's case, this is really just Eradicate and Moment of Craving. But we like to do this because it just is stronger while in meta. Wiggling, this is quite literally just moving your character around to pick up souls, which generally you don't want to do unless you are getting enough fury for a Void Ray, or you're about to get a Collapsing Star and you can't reap, or you're trying to snipe that last C-Star. Those are really the only cases where you're really wanting to do that as Annihilator. But that is the Annihilator rotation / priority for Season 2. It's pretty simple. It's pretty similar to last season. Void Scarred. Okay, we're going to get a little bit into the weeds here, but just stay with me. Again, I think doing this in written form is best to kind of describe what I'm talking about, and then there will be a clip of me doing it at the end of the video, which is coming soon. So, in single target, we are still doing precast Soul Immo, Consume, Reap, Soul Immo, Consume, Reap, like we were with Annihilator. But then we get to this point with the Void Ray. Void Blade here is basically indicating that meta is ready. So we're applying Devourer's Bite Stacks. So Void Blade, you're going to retreat immediately to create space so you can hunt, and then do something called Hunt Smuggling, which is acronym to, or not acronym, but shortened to Huggling, which basically just means, and I will scroll down to the Huggling section of the guide here too. Huggling is just when you're traveling with the hunt, because hunt is a 50-yard range, so you have a lot of time while you're traveling. Pressing meta in the middle of this travel, when you impact, it will deal damage as if it was Predator's Wake, because you're in meta before the impact happens, and it will smuggle in a Hungering Slash for you without, you basically get to save a GCD there as well. So it's very good to hunt smuggle. It's not something that you are holding cooldowns around, so you're basically going to start a fight with it and then do it as it's convenient. And then in AoE, you just want to send the hunt on cooldown, so hunt smuggling is not as huge of a thing in AoE, but we'll go into that when I get to that part of the rotation. But so, Void Blade, Vengeful Retreat, Hunt, Smuggle, Meta, use Trinkets and Potions, you'll press Cull, Reaper's Toll, Vengeful Retreat, Pierce the Veil, which is Void Blade, Reaper's Toll, which is Hungering Slash, Vengeful Retreat, Predator's Wake, which is the improved version of the Hunt like we just talked about, Reaper's Toll, Vengeful Retreat, Cull, Void Ray, Cull, which these sequences here, that's just our melee combo. Doing the melee combos very quickly next to each other is really important because you're maximizing the amount of time Devourer's Bite is stacking, because when you have all 4 Devourer's Bite stacks together, it's a 48% damage amp on your target. It's very short-lived, but it exists, and it's a very strong damage amp during that time. Now, this is just single target. Spell priority out of meta for single target is just Consuming if it will trigger Soul Burst, Reap at 4+ souls, Immo if one is not already active, Void Blade if you're about to enter meta, Vengeful Retreat after Void Blade if you're about to enter meta and the Hunt is available, Hunt smuggling like I said, Hunt on cooldown otherwise, Void meta, Hungering Slash, Void Step buffed Vengeful Retreats, Void Ray, and Consume. Again, this is not the static rotation. This opener is very static. As long as you are doing basically everything from here down, it's pretty static. This is just priority, so don't take this as this is the exact sequence I'm doing every time. Same with during meta, where it's just triggering Soul Burst, Call it 4+ souls, Reaper's Toll, Vengeful Retreat with Void Step, Pierce, Predator's Wake, Cull, Void Ray, Devour. Same concept. So our AoE opener for Devourer is pretty simple. I know it doesn't look very simple, but just Immo 2 seconds before pull, Consume. You always start with the Hunt just to put it on cooldown. Do this full combo. Reap, Soul Immo, Consume, Reap, Ray, and then you are smuggling the Eradicate, and then when you Void Blade, you're not going to create space like you would in single target to do the Hunt smuggle. You're just gonna press meta. Your first 2 GCDs in that opener for Void Scarred, and this is the opener every time you go into meta really, is Eradicate and Void Ray. Those are your first 2 GCDs always, because of how Void Ray timing works with Eradicate with our 18 to 20% haste breakpoint. So then you can spend your Reaper's Toll that you smuggled in. You can backflip to spend Void Step, do your melee combos again, and then spend Eradicate. And then we transition into what happens inside of meta as far as priority goes, which is largely actually very static for Void Scarred melee, at least in AoE. So when we get to, and I'll skip this because this is kind of the same as the opener, but the big thing here is if you have cast that second Void Ray, which is available probably right after that Eradicate, depending on your haste level, you are going to press our long lost friend Throw Glaive, because we don't want to generate any more Fury or Souls, because at that point in AoE, our Trinket is done, any buffs we've had are done, so we want to get back into meta again to do our combos again. So pressing Throw Glaive, since it doesn't generate Souls or Fury, we're going to get back, we want to get out. We want out, and then we're going to go back in. So it's kind of AFKing in a way, but and then if you can, right as you're about to get knocked out of meta, pressing Soul Immo is a gain, but don't trust yourself not to do it too early. Don't do it, because if you do it too early, you're just going to force yourself to be in meta longer than you want to be. But in AoE, we are just so focused on cycling our meta so quickly that doing this at the end gets us to our next meta even faster, which is our goal. And then once we're out, we have, since we're not pressing Collapsing Star, which you may have noticed in the rotation, we don't press Collapsing Star at all. It's terrible. It sucks. But with Rolling Torment, which gives us 0.5% of damage increase and some Fury per soul we didn't spend in meta. So you're not going to play around this too much, but once you're out of meta, you want to use the Eradicate proc that you shipped out, because you're always shipping out an Eradicate proc. And like I say here, our goal is to use the Shift Eradicate proc, get Soul Immo back on cooldown, use Void Ray, and to use any procs with Soul Burst which we may have, because we just want to get back into meta. So our priority here is just pressing Soul Burst, Errata 10 souls, Void Ray, Soul Immo, Hunt, Consume. And which this Hunt is implied as a full Hunt combo, because we're just sending this on cooldown. And then when this section here is basically just how do I get back into meta as fast as possible, while this is more maximizing that Rolling Torment damage, because Rolling Torment's really strong. So again, triggering Soul Burst, Errata 10 souls if meta's not ready, Void Ray, Void Blade if meta is ready, and then it's talking about Hunt Smuggling if it's available, Hunt if you can't Hunt Smuggle, or if it's not going to line up. You basically just don't want to hold Hunt Smuggling for too long. Meta, Hungering Slash, Void Step, Reap at 4+ souls, Soul Immo if one's not active, Consume. Again, these are all priorities. These are not exact rotations, just because Devourer is so RNG based that it can really go all over the place. So just use your best discretion, practice, of doing that all together. I know it's a little confusing when it's not in a untalky video format, but I think it's just important to go over this vocally, just so you can go back to it and understand kind of the process of that, rather than just, okay, this is my sequence every time, because we don't have a static sequence like that all the time. But once you get into the rhythm of playing Void Scarred, it actually does feel very static because you are in that rhythm. But before that, it feels a little all over the place. General tips: smuggling is basically the same, with the addition of like with hungering slash smuggling. There's a section on hungering here specifically, which we went over, and then wiggling is kind of the same thing as an eye. Shipping, same thing as well. But that is the rotation for Season 2 for both Devourer specs. I'm just going to call them specs because they are basically two different specs at this point. And then I am going to pull up the videos of the openers that will give you an idea of kind of what to be thinking about going into Season 2 as far as what your rotation is going to look like. And then we will do the outro. All right, everyone, that is going to be our Devourer guide for Season 2. I shook it up a little bit, especially with the rotation part, so just let me know your thoughts and kind of what I can improve on for Season 3. But I just want to say I'm really grateful for all the support, especially since like the Devourer Roundtable happened. I've just been really, really happy with the reception to that. And I'm really excited to make content for Season 2 and to see you all in-game, of course. Be sure to, once again, like and subscribe and check out my community Discord link below, as well as the Fellhammer Discord where you can find both my Devourer and Havoc guides. But for now, I hope you all have a wonderful day.